Everyone thinks they know Ozzy Osbourne, the bat-biting, reality TV star who supposedly sold his soul to rock and roll. But the real truth about the Prince of Darkness might surprise you. I'm about to separate decades of myths from the actual facts about one of music's most misunderstood legends. Welcome back to The Truth About, where we dig deep into the real stories behind iconic figures. Today, we're exploring the life of John Michael Osbourne, better known as Ozzy, who recently completed his final performance after over 50 years in music. Let's uncover what's true, what's legend, and what's completely made up. Let me tell you about the night that shaped the Prince of Darkness. Picture this. It's 1963, and 14-year-old John Osbourne is stumbling through the dark streets of Birmingham, completely drunk. He collapses in an alley, choking on his own vomit. A stranger finds him and calls an ambulance. When his mother Lillian arrives at the hospital, the doctor tells her something that will haunt her forever. Your son nearly died tonight. This won't be the last time. But here's what most people don't know. This wasn't rebellion. This was survival. Young Ozzy lived in a nightmare that no child should endure. Every morning, he'd wake up in a bed he shared with two brothers in a house so small that 6 kids took turns using the single bathroom. His father, Jack, worked brutal night shifts at a steel plant, coming home covered in burns and cuts. His mother cleaned rich people's houses, scrubbing floors for pennies, while her own children went hungry. At school, teachers would scream at Ozzy because he couldn't read the words on the blackboard. They didn't know about dyslexia back then. They just assumed he was stupid. One teacher actually wrote "mental defective" on his report card. Kids would corner him after school, calling him retard and freak. So he'd steal beer from local pubs and drink until the voices in his head stopped telling him he was worthless. The breaking point came when he was 15. His career's counselor got him a job at a slaughterhouse. His daily task was to kill cattle with a bull gun. Every morning, he'd look into the eyes of terrified animals and end their lives. The screaming, the blood, the smell of death. It broke something inside him that never fully healed. After 3 months, he couldn't take it anymore. That's when John Osbourne made a decision that would change music history. He walked out of that slaughterhouse, picked up a microphone, and decided that if the world was going to see him as a monster, he'd give them the greatest monster they'd ever seen. The Prince of Darkness wasn't born from evil. He was born from a broken boy who had nothing left to lose. Here's the true story of how 4 terrified kids accidentally created the devil's music. February 13th, 1970. It's a Friday night, and Tony Iommi is alone in his Birmingham flat, staring at his mutilated fingers. 6 months earlier, on his last day at a sheet metal factory, a machine had ripped off the tips of 2 fingers on his fretting hand. The doctor said his music career was over before it started. But Tony was desperate. He melted down plastic bottles and shaped them into fingertips, wrapped them in leather, and tuned his guitar down so low it sounded like the gates of hell opening. When he played that first heavy riff, something dark and powerful filled the room. He called his bandmates immediately. The next day, the 4 members of Earth gathered in a freezing warehouse they rented for £6 a week. Tony played his new riff, and bassist Geezer Butler started telling them about a nightmare he'd had. He'd seen a dark figure standing at the foot of his bed, and when he woke up, a book about black magic had mysteriously appeared on his shelf. Ozzy, who was high on amphetamines and hadn't slept in 3 days, started improvising lyrics about the figure Geezer described. But here's the twist. Ozzy was terrified. He'd been wearing a cross his mother gave him ever since he started having panic attacks, and now he clutched it while singing about darkness and evil. Within 20 minutes, they had written Black Sabbath, the song that would birth heavy metal. But they had no idea what they'd unleashed. At their first performance of the song, audience members started fainting. A woman in the front row began speaking in tongues. Someone threw a dead cat on stage. The band was horrified. After the show, Tony found Geezer crying in the bathroom. "What have we done?" Geezer asked. "What if we've actually summoned something?" They seriously considered breaking up that night, terrified they'd opened a door they couldn't close. But the phone kept ringing. Venues wanted to book that scary band. Record labels came calling. Within months, they'd accidentally created an entire genre of music. The irony. For working-class kids from Birmingham, led by a singer who wore crosses and prayed before every show, had become the godfathers of devil music. They were just trying to pay rent. Instead, they changed music forever. This is the story of how one dead bat destroyed and saved Ozzy's life. January 20th, 1982, Des Moines, Iowa. Ozzy is backstage at Veterans Memorial Auditorium, and he's completely wasted. He's been drinking since breakfast. 4 bottles of cognac before noon has become his normal routine. His solo career is exploding, but he's drowning in guilt and alcohol. Why? Because 3 years earlier, he'd been kicked out of Black Sabbath, and every night he goes to sleep wondering if he'll ever matter again. But tonight is different. Tonight, Randy Rhoads, his 24-year-old guitar player, who's basically become the son he never had, is trying to talk sense into him. "You're killing yourself," Randy says, holding Ozzy's shaking hands. "Your music matters. People need you." But Ozzy can barely focus on the words. The room is spinning, and he can hear 5,000 fans chanting his name. He stumbles onto stage, barely able to stand. The crowd is going insane, throwing everything they can find: clothes, jewelry, food. Then something lands at his feet. In the blinding stage lights, it looked like one of those rubber bats they sell at Halloween stores. So Ozzy, in his drunken state, decides to give the fans what they want. He picks it up, holds it above his head, and bites down hard. The moment his teeth pierce the bat's body, everything changes. It's real. It's dead. And it tastes like death and disease. Blood fills his mouth as he realizes what he's done. The crowd erupts, thinking it's all part of the show. But Ozzy is genuinely horrified. He spits out pieces of bat and runs off stage, vomiting uncontrollably. What happened next would haunt him forever. The media went insane. Headlines screamed, "Ozzy bites bat's head off." Suddenly, he wasn't John Osbourne the musician. He was Ozzy the madman. The incident overshadowed everything: his incredible voice, Randy's genius guitar work, the emotional depth of his songs. He became a circus act. But here's the tragedy within the tragedy. Just 2 months later, on March 19th, 1982, Randy Rhoads died in a plane crash. The last real conversation they had was Randy begging him to get sober, to take his talent seriously. Now Randy was gone, and Ozzy was known worldwide as the guy who bit a bat. For months after Randy's death, Ozzy would sit in his hotel room, staring at that newspaper headline about the bat, and crying. He'd traded his musical legacy for a moment of drunken stupidity, and now the only person who truly believed in his artistry was dead. The bat incident had made him famous, but it had also made him a prisoner of his own image. Every night for the rest of his career, fans would throw dead animals on stage, expecting him to repeat his moment of madness. He never did it again, but he could never escape it either. Here's the night Sharon Osbourne decided to marry a man everyone said would be dead within a year. December 31st, 1981. Sharon Osbourne is sitting in a London hospital waiting room at 3 a.m., still wearing her New Year's Eve party dress. For the 4th time this year, she's gotten a call. Ozzy's overdosed again. He might not make it this time. She's only 29 years old, but she looks exhausted. Her friends keep asking her the same question: "Why do you stay with him?" The truth is, Sharon saw something in Ozzy that no one else could see. When they first met in 1970, she was just 18, working for her father Don Arden, one of music's most ruthless managers. Ozzy was this broken, stammering kid from Birmingham who couldn't read a contract and was too shy to make eye contact. While everyone else saw a drugged-out rock star, Sharon saw a terrified little boy who'd been told his entire life that he was worthless. Their love story began with an intervention. In 1979, when Black Sabbath fired Ozzy for being too messed up even for them, Sharon made a decision that would change both their lives. She walked into her father's office and said, "I'm going to manage Ozzy." Her father laughed. "He'll be dead in 6 months," he said. "You'll lose everything." But Sharon had a plan. She didn't just want to manage Ozzy's career. She wanted to save his life. She found him living in a filthy hotel room, weighing barely 120 pounds, convinced he was going to die alone. She sat on his bed and made him a promise. "If you let me help you, I'll make you bigger than you ever were with Sabbath. But you have to trust me completely." What followed was the greatest management partnership in rock history. Sharon didn't just book shows. She created a theatrical experience that turned Ozzy's demons into art. She designed the stage shows, negotiated the contracts, handled the media, and literally carried him to the stage when he was too drunk to walk. She was his manager, his therapist, his best friend, and eventually his wife. But here's what most people don't know. Even after they married on July 4th, 1982, Sharon continued to save his life almost monthly. She learned to recognize the signs of an overdose, kept syringes of Narcan in every room of their house, and built a network of doctors who would come to their home at any hour. She didn't just love Ozzy. She became his life support system. The breaking point came in 2016. Ozzy had relapsed after years of sobriety and was having an affair. Sharon, after 34 years of marriage, finally said the words she'd never said before. "I'm done. I can't save you anymore." She moved out, and for 6 months, Ozzy lived alone for the first time since 1979. That's when he realized something that changed everything. Sharon hadn't just saved his career, she'd given him a reason to live. Without her, he wasn't the Prince of Darkness. He was just John Osbourne, a scared kid from Birmingham who couldn't read and didn't know how to love himself. He got sober, went to therapy, and begged her to come home. She did, but on one condition. "This is the last time I save you, Ozzy. Next time, you have to save yourself." This is the story of how the Prince of Darkness faced his greatest enemy, his own body. March 15th, 2019. Ozzy Osbourne is lying face down on his bathroom floor in Beverly Hills, unable to move. He'd been getting out of the shower when his legs simply gave out. Sharon finds him there an hour later, conscious but paralyzed from the neck down. As the paramedics load him onto a stretcher, Ozzy whispers something that breaks Sharon's heart. "I think this is it. I think I'm done." What the world didn't know was that this moment had been building for 16 years. Back in 2003, Ozzy had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, but he'd begged his doctors to keep it secret. "If people know I'm sick," he'd said, "they'll stop coming to the shows. And if they stop coming to the shows, I'm not Ozzy anymore. I'm just a sick old man." So began the most elaborate cover-up in rock history. Sharon coordinated with doctors to time his medications perfectly with concert schedules. They invented excuses for his worsening tremors. "It's just a cold," or "he's tired from touring." The family became expert liars, protecting Ozzy's secret at enormous personal cost. Jack and Kelly couldn't even tell their closest friends why their father was deteriorating so rapidly. The 2019 bathroom fall changed everything. The impact had damaged vertebrae in his neck, requiring emergency spinal surgery. But when Ozzy woke up from the operation, he couldn't feel his hands. The surgeon delivered the devastating news. There was a chance he might never walk again, and almost certainly would never perform again. For 6 months, Ozzy lived in a medical bed in his living room, staring at the ceiling and wondering if this was how his story would end. He couldn't hold a pen to write lyrics. He couldn't play guitar. Some days, he couldn't even speak clearly enough for Sharon to understand him. The man who had spent 50 years defying death was finally being defeated by his own body. But then something remarkable happened. His longtime guitarist Zach Wild came to visit and brought a small recording setup. "Let's just see if you can still sing," Zach said. They started working on what would become Patient Number 9, Ozzy's final album. Recording in 10-minute increments between naps, speaking lyrics into his phone when his hands shook too much to write, Ozzy discovered that his voice, the one thing that had never failed him, was still perfect. This gave him the strength for one final gift to his fans. Against his doctor's advice, he planned a farewell concert in Birmingham, the city where it all began. February 3rd, 2025, at the Birmingham Arena. He performed for 90 minutes in a custom wheelchair, surrounded by the original Black Sabbath members and dozens of musicians whose careers he'd inspired. The concert was broadcast worldwide and watched by over 50 million people. It raised millions for Parkinson's research, and it gave Ozzy something he'd never had before, the chance to say goodbye on his own terms. 5 months later, on July 22nd, 2025, Ozzy Osbourne died peacefully at home. His last words to his children were simple. "Take care of Sharon. She saved me every day for 40 years." The Prince of Darkness had finally found his peace, not in death, but in the love of the woman who never stopped believing that the broken boy from Birmingham was worth saving. So what's the real truth about Ozzy Osbourne? The truth is that John Michael Osbourne was simultaneously exactly what you'd expect and nothing like his persona. Yes, he bit a bat's head off. Yes, he struggled with addiction for decades. But he was also a loving father, a loyal husband, a savvy businessman, and ironically, deeply religious throughout his life. He didn't worship darkness, he fought it, both in himself and in his music. The Prince of Darkness was really a man desperately seeking the light. What surprised you most about the real Ozzy Osbourne? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more videos separating fact from fiction about music legends, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. Until next time, keep questioning what you think you know.